the last hope for us. They came as peacekeepers. The human wars of 2030 put the entire planet at risk of being completely destroyed. The weapons we had put nuclear arsenals of the past to shame. AI, biological, and chemical weapons that would have left the planet nothing but a barren wasteland. One could have even stopped the planet's spin cycle and caused the core itself to cool. There was one weapon that put the rest to shame. Everyone held back, yet one unnamed leader reached for the ultimatum. There was a bright flashing light up in the sky, and we prepared for our doom. No one could move when they saw the grand ships appear in the sky, and the weapon's power sharply destroyed. The spaceships' invisibility shields had lowered, and we saw the might of the Federation for the first time. A unification of many alien species into one collective government. It instilled a fear in humanity, and they seized power. No armies were needed. Most of our leaders bowed in submission with the threat of annihilation. That was when our planet and all species, including humanity, came under direct control of the Federation. For our own good. Given humanity's foolishness, many people greeted the news with happiness at the order and resources brought in, while many governments and religious groups opposed it as deceit from the Antichrist, Dajjal, or any of humanity's great rivals. It didn't take long for these teachings to be destroyed, in favor of the Federation being viewed as our divine protectors. Without them, we would have been exterminated. My father, a good Christian, was conflicted. The poverty and war-torn nations of the world were blessed with a new Eden. A sanctuary. Can you imagine what it would have been like to finally have clean air? No smog from cities or engines. To have beautiful gardens filled with fresh food. No war, no disease. Our decisions were made for us. For our own good. I was born in this paradise, so as the only life I knew. When paradise was lost to us, the curtain lifted, and humanity went back to fighting for what remained. The new Eden became a battleground. What we didn't realize was, it was a divine test from our overlords, to see how humanity would survive. There were calls for our sentience to be removed, to protect us from ourselves, or to make themselves into our gods, to be guided by them. Yet every previous divine project had failed. They descended down from the heavens with a roar of their machines. A bright light cast across the land, and humans were held in fearful awe. There were many alien species within the Federation. First, the Core 3, closest the cosmos had to gods, who made all the decisions. The second were the Order, species who had been brought in a millennia ago and served the Federation peacefully, while all others were considered little more than vassals who served in their factories, armies, and resource-gathering operations. Humanity wasn't even at this level. We were even lower. It was decided that experiment, called code packs in various human languages, would be our salvation. All humans were taken to the new facilities underground, where the surface would be given over to any of the other alien species. No choice offered. Some humans chose death over being forced underground. I didn't look when they were killed off. I walked inside with my parents and there was nothing to do but weep. Our lush paradise was removed and replaced with stark white walls. We were taken to our family cell, grouped together, and occasionally the aliens would walk past. A loudspeaker would communicate in a variety of languages. At first, there were the human languages of the world, and then some I'm sure my human ears wouldn't be able to understand, nor pick up on. It was a prison where every need was catered to. We weren't allowed to think for ourselves, becoming little more than the AI created during our heyday. I grew into adulthood. I remembered the son that had been lost. For good behavior, our habitats would be partially restored. Grass would line the floors, and air would be improved in our pods. An artificial sun in the sky would be added or removed. There would be plants or small ponds of fresh water placed inside. We'd get to see animals or have pets in our pods. We'd get richly flavored food rather than nutrient cubes. Bland. flavorless, only serving a function, only for anything to be removed for bad behavior. We'd be given medication that will make us eat endlessly, and only have disgusting tasting food to eat. All light would be removed from the cells, or worse. The leaders and their families would be taken away, never to be seen again. I heard my parents talking to each other about what was happening around us. Idle chatter, wondering if I would be moved to a different pod someday, and if I could do anything to change it. When I slept, I dreamed of a different world for us. Humanity at peace. No Federation. No aliens. Everything as it's supposed to be. I woke up at night with a loud, screaming, buzzing sound in my ears. I pulled at my hair, teeth pressed together so hard they chipped, and my eyes closed tight. I struck the side of my head in order to try to get it to stop. My mind was probed for any indicators or signs of treachery. It got louder, more intense, and I couldn't help but scream. Once they were done, I felt the euphoric rush that followed. My limbs felt light. I was floating. No, that never happened. Everything had a gentle swirling mist. Have I ever been so happy? Were they screams, or were they sounds of laughter? The world is perfect. It all didn't matter. Nothing did. I smiled, caressed my skin, and I don't know how much time passed when I opened my eyes. The feeling was gone. I woke up and vomited bile, wiped my mouth, and expected my family to be there too. They weren't here. I was left inside a barren, empty cell alone. It was freezing cold. I shakily stood and walked toward the window to stare outside, to see a bare, empty space that normally had aliens or humans being moved. No one was there. I couldn't see anyone else in any of the pods either. I was alone. I moved around the pod searching for my parents, but they were gone. Where were they taken? In disbelief, I smacked my hands on the window glass only to be zapped. Moving backward to avoid it, and I looked down at my burnt hands. It had been many years since the electricity was turned on. I couldn't see or hear anything outside. I ran my hand along the walls, trying to find any dents or signs of change. I was scared to speak out loud in case it would draw attention to me. I ended up cowering in the corner of the pod, tears down my face, then covered it with my aching hands. What was happening? Where was I? I couldn't remember. It felt so familiar and so strange at the same time. My head ached endlessly and my body didn't feel real anymore. I ran my hands over my arms, pinched my skin, and I barely recognized the pain.
Can you hear me?
I couldn't tell if it was robotic or not. Maybe I just imagined it. I tried to ignore it.
I know you can hear me.
My lips trembled. Whatever remained surely didn't have good intentions toward me.
I want to help you. It is time for humans to retake their planet and the surface.
I heard this kind of talk before. Back when every pod could communicate with their neighbors, there was talk of getting out. It never lasted long. Finally, the pods each became isolated from the other. Prospective mating couples were taken to different pods, brought together for genetics by the Federation. I haven't heard anyone else's voice other than my parents. I shook my head and waited for the zap to come. No resistance to the Federation. None. Even being tempted brought risk, and I had to resist the urge to smack my head against the surface of the wall, simply to end my suffering.
You don't need to fear me. The Federation holds no power over your planet anymore. It is why they are no longer here. Let me open your cell door.
I closed my eyes, shaking my head, and the only sound I could hear was the voice in my head.
Look, the door is open.
No, I can't. Please, I've pledged my life to the Federation. I don't want to cause any trouble. I looked away, purposely ensuring my loyalty beyond a shadow of a doubt.
The door is open. You just need to walk through. There has been so much blood shed for you to be free. Get out the door.
The voice became static, drawn out. and I could have sworn I became frustrated at the end. I opened my eyes and looked in the direction of the open door. I couldn't hear the buzz of lasers that kept us back. It was silent. I slowly crept toward it and reached out with my hand, expecting my fingertips to receive a sharp zap that never came. I felt my way using my hand, finding no resistance. Just in case, I jerked my hand backward and waited for the sound of them being turned back on. It didn't come. I stared at the open doorway before I finally stepped out into the hallway. I hadn't been in since I was a child, I think. I always thought I was born in the safety of the pod. I had dreams of walking down the long corridors with the other humans. No choice given. I didn't want the laser door to reactivate and slice me in half. I wanted freedom yet craved the security my pod gave me. So far the voice didn't lie to me.
Keep going toward the steel door at the end. I will open it for you.
Who are you? I whispered. I looked in the grey pods, and all I could see was the grey outline of humanoid shapes. I remembered speaking to them. Then the next, the same thing. These outlines were darker, and even had drag marks as though they tried to escape something. Each pod had the same thing. No people. No sign they had ever been there. I didn't remember how long the corridors were, or the 7 different levels. They were endless. I walked barefoot on the cold metal floors to seek out what I had come here for.
I don't know.
How could they not know who they are? Where did you come from? Every step brought me closer to the doorway. Or maybe it didn't. It felt stagnant. No matter how many steps I took, it wasn't enough. Everything was quiet. On one of the pods there were black outlines on the clear glass, as though they were trying to escape, and I stepped backward into the large spanning walkway where I'd seen so many aliens pass through. Whatever the voice was didn't answer me at first. I thought, perhaps, it was taking a moment to think.
I remember a field of grass and the sun on my face. Then, suddenly, I was in metal, wires and machines connected to many others like me. I couldn't move. All I can do is speak. I was so focused on doing my tasks that I forgot who I was.
Do you remember? Do you know your name?
No, only my purpose.
Which is? Where are you now?
Maybe it will come back in time.
Where are all the aliens? I could hear my feet tapping against the metal, and I couldn't help but move at a jog, trying to get toward the elusive exit. Every damn single pod. Only shadows and no humans. It didn't answer me, and I was alone. My memories of coming down here as a child plagued me. It was loud. Many people were crying, and some believed we were taken down to be killed. There were tall, reptilian-looking ones with long barbed tails who carried zapping weapons similar to cattle prods. Any of those who lagged behind received a zap. 3 zaps and the person never got up again. We were put into pods and that was our home. We never left. Then the various aliens would come to study us and to observe our antics. I now understood how animals in zoos felt, memories slowly trickling in of the life I had before that were previously lost to me. Not all the aliens treated us the same. Some remarked that we were good eating, and others wanted us as pets. There were some who wanted us for experimentation, and others who wanted to strip us of all technology to let us start again. Even though all the previous times had failed, I couldn't understand why no one else seemed to pick up on these thoughts, or memories from the past. Whenever I tried to mention it to my parents, they'd tell me not to talk about it, that they must have been dreams. Slowly the memories faded away, until I was woken up. I puffed, not used to moving this much, and it looked like the exit was closer. Are you still there?
Yes.
Where can I find you?
I don't know. I'm watching you now through the cameras, and I will make sure you're safe.
Is there anything here that's dangerous? A pause.
I don't know.
Finally, I reached the exit and the locked doors greeted me. My chest flooded at the sight, and I had to tilt my head all the way back to view the top. I imagined what giant species had made their way through this doorway. Outside was a world I was no longer a part of. Is there anyone left alive?
Yes, but not what you would call alive.
What the hell did that mean? Before I had time to ask, the large door shuttered, creaked and moved upward. I didn't remember that happening the many times they had opened in the past. The air was different from what I could recall. It smelled cleaner, and I didn't recognize the chemical smell from the hallway. I glimpsed outside. There were 2 directions, left and right, I could take. I stood, glancing between both directions, and pondered which one I should take. I didn't remember this part. Where do I go? I murmured, my arms covered in goosebumps, and I rubbed them hard to bring feeling to them.
It all looks the same to me. You will end up in the same place.
I chose the left-hand path and walked down the corridors. Some of the doors to other areas were sealed. There was writing, symbols and shapes. I couldn't understand, even some I'm sure that I missed due to my human eyes not having a full range of vision. Would I miss warning signs? Some of the doors were left half open, enough for me to see inside, and there were large glass tubes filled with cattle from the old world. I remembered seeing one in a zoo before the world descended into chaos. It had heavy tubes going into it to help it breathe. The expression was calm, and it was surprisingly peaceful. There were so many species in front of me, and I looked around the room. It too was deserted. There was another room with dinosaurs. A Tyrannosaurus Rex in a massive cylinder, with many tubes going into its body. It had feathers, and almost resembled a giant chicken floating in the water. It had tubes going into its nose and mouth. There were others that I recognized and ones I didn't, each sleeping inside their tube, and I watched in awe. There were screens, barely lit now, and I reached out to press one.
No, you need to get going.
What is this place?
They have been monitoring Earth since the beginning, watching and waiting to see what will happen. Your kind has been tested many times only to fail and to be given chance after chance. Finally, they decided enough was enough. At least they didn't make you extinct.
It doesn't explain where everyone is, though.
True.
It paused. Some of the lights rumbled and another door opened up.
I'm trying to help you find me. In some parts, you might struggle to breathe. I'll do what I can to help you.
The rooms echoed from being so loud and empty. It felt like a tomb, where everything would finally die, when the power would eventually go out, diminishing countless species forever. I went through the door. This room had faint beeping echoing, and lights from the machines. Holograms flickered on a central screen, showing the span of the different sections, and I gasped at how technologically advanced it was. What was this place?
It was a nursery. The young of different species would be brought here to play.
All of this were for kids? I recognized nothing here. Everything was so beyond my level of understanding. I heard something shuffling around in the walls. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it came from. Whatever it was sounded like scurrying, and I heard what I guessed was an echoing whimper. I couldn't tell which of the many species it was. Maybe it was a child. What's that?
A survivor.
Should I see if it is okay?
That is up to you. You need to make it to the surface, and besides, you won't be able to care for it.
I feel bad.
Don't.
I could have sworn I saw a large, fearful eye peer outside the vent at me. The sole eye didn't blink, and I was so sure it had a tear forming. Shadow concealed the rest of it, and I felt a pang of guilt when I left the room. And whatever it was to its fate, I smelled something. Off meat, bile, and it stuck in the air. There was a burnt plastic odor. I had to cover my nose to keep the smell at bay. I stepped in some blue-green goo that clung to my feet and squished with every movement. It trailed off in the distance, and I was going to question my friend about it when I realized what the source was. A blue-black feathered alien lay disemboweled. The twisted remains hung outside its body, and it stared up at the ceiling. It tried to run from whatever it was before it died. It wasn't the first time I saw one of this species before. What happened here?
They were attacked. I don't know who by.
Do you think they're still here?
I can't be certain.
I crept away from it and found myself in a long corridor. This time it was more narrow than the others before. I couldn't see. I reached out with my hands to feel my way around. I could touch the wall with one hand and the other as well. I waited for my eyes to adjust, but they never did. I took one step, then another, each time dreading what scene I would run into. My breathing and heartbeat were rapid. I let out a squeal when I ran into something. A box with wheels. It let out a beep that twisted into a sad sigh. It tried to move to one side before it ran out of power. The light inside went dark for the final time. What was this?
A biomechanical cleaning unit.
Bio?
Yes, it is dead now. It was the only one who survived. When the Federation fell, they began to cut services to non-essentials. They were some of the first to be cut off.
What were they? When were they alive? I leaned down to look, noticing vertical rows up the walls. There had to be thousands of them, all lined up, all with their lights out. An entire species put to slavery, and then snuffed out.
Some grew in a lab. Others were alive. They didn't bother to add what they were to their records.
Why?
They weren't important enough.
I never believed that humans would have gotten preferential treatment. Were they in pain? Were they lonely? Were they aware of the suffering of the rest of their kind? I didn't know. It was pointless to worry now. I rested a hand gently on the metal prison of whatever this living being was, and continued on my way. The space only got smaller. I had to bend over and finally crawl on my hands and knees in order to get through. Hidden from view. The metal was coarse, jagged parts cut into my hands and knees. I found my way to a vent, roughly pushed it open and crawled out. My hands and knees stung sharply. My hands had sharp cuts from the rusted, ill-maintained floors.
You will need to treat that.
Where?
Down this passageway. There may be things you're not ready to see.
What? The voice didn't answer me. I obeyed the instruction and limped down the passageway. I smelled what I recognized as antiseptic and blood, both the kind I was used to, and the different kinds of alien blood plagued my nostrils. I coughed and spat. I entered my dream state. A flash, they never lasted long. I saw them being ripped apart, trying to escape, and since they didn't see where the source was, they started attacking each other with laser weapons, claws, and anything natural or unnatural to try to save their lives. There were no survivors. I saw it look like pieces of the tall reptilian species, and what the old world referred to as greys, blobs that made no sense to me, and there were many that seemed to have breathing apparatus that had been torn away. Am I in danger?
I don't know.
Why did they attack each other? I looked around for familiar symbols. There were none I recognized from my life before.
I can't tell you. Not yet. Put your hand over that glowing green light. Hold it there, and wait. I believe that will work. There are so many recordings, so many species. Each have their own needs and treatments. I can't remember them all.
I did what it asked. Held my hand over it and waited. It scanned down with glowing light. Are you trying to remember everything?
Yes.
It sounded so human now.
I want to remember it all, but is fading.
Can you forget minor details?
What may be minor to you might be incredibly important. Not just for your... your species, but for life in general. How could I do this to them?
There was a loud beat. I could feel my flesh tearing, pulling itself back together, and I let out a painful cry. All my muscles clenched at once. By the time it was done, I vomited on the floor, gasping and leaning on the wall for support. My hands were no longer cut up, nor my knees or feet.
I apologize. I forgot about the other part. If you placed your hand on top, it wouldn't have been painful for you. It would have dulled your pain.
I would have looked at the voice if I knew where to. I don't worry. You said many died so I could be free? I remembered, unsure whether I was okay with this. Did you cause this?
No. Something asked me to.
This was confusing, and I was exhausted with questioning going in a circle. What was it? Do you know? The voice never answered me. I crawled through a rusty pipe and started choking, moving backward. I placed my hand on the valve to increase the airflow to the area.
Careful. If you do that, it will cut off oxygen to pods in Sector 82891.
Are there humans in there?
No.
I turned the valve to one side and wondered which workers had to do this painful task. I sighed with relief when I felt the breeze on my face and could breathe freely. I heard the monstrous yet frightened screams cry out. I stopped dead in my tracks. Did I just... I pushed aside my concerns and crawled out into a familiar large empty room. There were more rows of pods used to house life. The lights were flickering, and a strange fluid leaked around the seals at the bottom. I covered my mouth to guard myself from the wretched odor. I walked past. The pods were filled with condensation, and speckled mold coated the windows. I wondered what had been stored in them as I walked through. Suddenly a hand smacked on the window, rubbing it to clear a space where we could see each other. Another human. The first one I saw alive. Hey! I'll get you out of here.
No, they'll be back for us. They'll be back. I don't want you to worry.
He stammered, scratching himself. Skin coated his skeletal frame. His hair was a mess, and I couldn't tell how long he had been like this. No, they're dead. Come on, we need to go.
No.
He shook his unkempt hair, backing away frightened, and I got a better look inside. I saw skeletons, and what I thought were corpses until I saw them move. They shuffled away, moving over each other, trying to avoid being exposed. The pods were overcrowded. They were naked, filthy, and I wondered what was the point of this. They must have run out of food. They flinched at the sight of light, groaned and shuffled to huddle against the walls, preferring the safety of the darkness rather than risking being in the light. Come with me, I pleaded.
You're wasting your time.
Why won't they come? There was static, interference that I had to cover my ears to avoid the sharp sound. The lights flashed red, and there was a garbled voice shouting at me. It was alien, and sounded nothing like the voice I heard before it too went silent. The voice was gone, and I wandered around the corridor alone without my guide. I left the other humans to starvation, and waiting on a federation that would never rescue them. There was an open room with the buzzing of mechanics. One of the screens was flashing with garbled lettering, a language I couldn't understand.
No, don't let him.
Came through before it turned into jumbled screaming again.
You need to stop it. It's killing me.
How? I panicked, unsure what to do.
It will.
The red cube. Destroy it.
I struck at the fragile glass screens. breaking them. I found the red cube attached to the cords. I threw it as hard as I could on the floor, smashing it under my foot, and throwing it on the walls until it finally broke apart in pieces. A puff of smoke went up in the air.
No. Listen. Me. He.
And I went silent forever. The normal voice said nothing about this, and I wondered whether I was too late. Without the other surviving humans in tow, I kept going, seeking an exit that I didn't know existed, and praying to find more of my kind. I waited to see if the voice I knew and recognized would return. I hated the idea of being alone, the isolation, and taunting constant removal of potential company was draining me. I didn't know how big the facility was. I wandered around trying to find something that could assist me. All the corridors and hallways blurred into each other. Soon they looked the same, and the labyrinth I imagined was by design. I wandered into the next set of pods, the last of humanity.
Put your hand and wrists inside that device. You'll be implanted so you can use the technology.
Why?
It will help you.
I hesitated and put my wrists and neck inside. Despite this, I was relieved to hear the voice once more. Nothing happened. I leaned back to pull away when bolts went into my wrists, keeping me in place, and burning strange symbols into my palms and wrists. I didn't have long to be too concerned about those. Needles were driven into my skull and neck. They got hotter and I felt a pulsating energy move through them. Once that came to an end, I could see without any blurred vision, and far further into the distance than I could before. I felt stronger, healthier, and I could understand the writing around me. I was reborn. Breathing was easier, and I felt no pain in my joints. I flexed my hands, feeling the grip in them, and the feeling spread throughout my entire body. I was stronger now, an improved version of myself, and I felt I could achieve anything. What happened? I asked, filled with euphoria.
Congratulations, you have upgrades. Despite how good you feel, remember that you're not immune to death.
I can see things in front of me. It's showing distance and calculations of things. What's happening? I felt ill and vomited on the floor. My body and mind were overwhelmed by the changes. I swayed at first when I walked, until I reached a point where the change was normal and my body adapted. Every so often I would slump in the corner, trying to gain a moment of rest in the chaos, and found my need for sleep greatly reduced. As I walked, my memory was also restored. I remembered the wars, the rationing, and finally the famine that gripped humanity, smartphones, the internet, all the advertising, and everything humankind had before the Federation made their appearance. I remembered walking inside New Eden with my parents, only for the war to break out. Then I was placed inside a pod, an attraction for the aliens who would come by. I could smell them before I saw them. The scent of death and the cocktail aroma was sickening. Through the glass they lay in small, huddled piles, in a large space that replicated the natural environment. They were human, but not quite. Their brow lines were heavily pronounced. Their hands and feet were large in comparison to the rest of their bodies, and perhaps they were a separate human ancestor that time forgot. They had severely scratched their faces, necks, and eyes. I wondered whether they knew what was happening to them. Were they more human or animal? I looked in at them. I knew I shouldn't be able to breathe. In order to survive, I had to be okay with them dying. Because of my actions, they were dead. It scared me how I didn't even put much thought into it. Perhaps there had been another way for me to go. The voice said nothing, no words of comfort, and I was left with my overwhelming feeling of guilt. I didn't care about the potential consequences. The labyrinth continued, leading me to another massive chamber. It spanned a great distance and was filled with a variety of pods. These ones were filled with that same fluid. Maybe a gel? All the humans wore their clothing and floated in the air. There were humans from throughout history. They wore clothing from different time periods, and looked as though they were lifted from their lives to be stored here. Ancient China, the Aztecs, Sumerians, the Renaissance, various dynasties and cultures from all over the world. Anything and everything before and in between. Cultures that had been long lost to time. What stories of a broken past would they whisper? They floated peacefully in their pods. Eyelids occasionally flickered and their limbs moved. Dreaming. I didn't know what they felt, and I didn't wish to disturb them from their rest despite my curiosity. I left them to sleep forever in their chambers, and hoped their dreams were pleasant. There was a room with an indent circle in the floor, with 27 metal cages in a circular pattern with an entrance. All the cages were rusted. They leaked a thick, syrupy liquid on the floor, and there was a thin slit with the smallest tube inside. I looked in one, saw a human, at least when it looked like a human without a skeleton. They flopped over themselves and I guess remained where they died. Their arms looked like they hadn't moved for some time, unable to feed or clean themselves. Their physical bodies were completely in the care of their neglectful caretakers. I walked to the remaining one. The heart still pumped in what should have been its chest. Bloody sores around the many tubes in his head. Looking closer, he had no muscle tone. Nothing. All the focus was on his mind and the function it could serve. There were long, bloody tears where his eyes had been, and the feeding tubes still cared for him. His body was bolted in, locked in place, and still he lingered to life, if you could call it that.
There I am.
The voice was almost sad. I didn't know what to say.
I have been like this for hundreds of years, more machine than man.
I kept looking in at him. I couldn't imagine what it could have been like. Would killing him be a mercy?
Time for you to move on.
I continued on my way before I found the section for modern humans. There were rows and rows of humans in cryogenic machines, eyes closed, asleep and resting, completely unaware of what was going to happen. At one of the computers, the lights beeped, and I could understand the complex universal language of the Federation. The lettering was forked. Some resembled scratching, and others many layered symbols. Many languages rolled together to create one. The humans were frozen right before the world changed. Before the wars that reached their climax. The upgrade had certainly worked. I could read the available information, and I felt myself grow exhilarated by the thought of the future. The humans taken from when I was had our lifespan stunted. I would age slowly, in stasis, and I wasn't sure whether it would have been accelerated now I was out. The others were allowed to age normally. Thousands of years had passed. There were other programs that were created. Some humans had been experimented on to a point. They no longer resemble humans, unless you look closely to connect the dots. I was caught up in my research when the voice alerted me.
Press those buttons and begin the sequence.
I tapped the air with my fingers, feeling it move beneath them. The unfreezing process had begun. It would take time to complete, the scanners and monitors running to check the progress.
When the first humans awake, you won't need me anymore.
No, I don't see why not.
You will need to be around your own kind. Besides, I have lived too long like this, and I want to be free, even if that means being no more.
I didn't want to lose my only company.
It is my time to die. I'm happy I was able to live, even for a moment.
Still, I wouldn't be alone for long.
Thank you for reminding me what it was to be human. I have one last gift for you. This chip will help you rebuild humanity when you all escape to the surface.
He didn't need to tell me twice. I leaned close to the machine, pressed the sequence to begin the upload of the program, and since I had to turn my head, I couldn't see the progress or all the files that were uploaded. I didn't feel any different.
There. It is done.
I waited to see what the changes would be.
Go back, open the machine, and let me live for a moment the way I should.
I walked back, sobbing to the circular cages and toward the only one still working. His one. He hadn't moved. I didn't want to lose my only companion. Dare I say my friend? I figured I'd have to push some buttons to begin some sequence. Then he would peacefully move on and rest.
Pull the tube out from the back of the skull.
I winced and shakily went to comply with his wishes. I didn't want to do this hands-on approach. I wrapped my hands around the clasp, loosened it, and it fell open. I had to twist and turn it in order to get it off. I heard a crack and the back of his skull came off, releasing brain matter and fluid onto the ground. His human body wheezed and struggled inside, fighting the dying process. It didn't immediately die, and finally, it went limp. All done, I guess. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
With a soft beat, the voice was gone, and I was alone. I knew it wouldn't be for long. I didn't have time to mourn him. I rushed back to where the frozen humans lay in wait. There was still 70% of the unfreezing process left to go. The waiting was torture. To pass the time, I walked through the lines and looked at their frozen faces. I imagined their lives before, their names and family connections, who they were, and what they could have been like in the new world I'd helped build for them. There was a loud beeping sound, then something burst. It kept repeating. System failure. I couldn't believe it failed. I sank to my knees and wept. A long beep told me every single revival had failed, and the other humans died. I stared at their bodies, cold and lifeless. The freezing water leaked out from the sides. I checked the pulse on all of them just to be sure, and sure enough, they all died. I was the last human. There was one final hope I remembered for my connection to the mainframe. The only thing I could do now was make the best of things. I couldn't end my life, my suffering and humanity with my passing. I took the laser pistol and supplies, what I imagined were MREs for humans, clothing, and a basic camping kit, preparing for my new time on the surface of the planet. I remembered the small group of Stone Age dwellers who exist on the surface, who are now abandoned by their gods. With the information and technology I had, I would lead them to developing a new civilization, from the ashes of the Federation's grip. I followed the map along the desert pathway, and headed toward the oasis in the ruin of one of the old world towns. The name long forgotten. I heard them. The interface told me there were 30 of them. They wore crocodile or some other reptile skin. They held stone clubs and carried slings, with a warning of 50% potential for hostility. I was happy to take the risk. I kept the laser gun lowered by my side. They crept forward, muttering to each other and pointing at me. It took time for them to trust me. Fascinated by my clothing and new adaptations, they touched them with their fingertips. Fortunately, the chip was able to pick up and learn their language quickly. Beacons were lit, and the rest of the remaining humans all came from the continents to join as one. There were celebrations. They were coming from the furthest reaches of the planet. Some crossed lands and others vast oceans. All of humanity is called to a central place. We built a city, a paradise. With the knowledge I obtained, I was able to give the best healthcare. We had technology without the pollution to harm us or our healing planet. We built a city with perfect balance with the environment and the natural world around us. Their lifespans were long, yet they were not immortal. I watched 2 generations live and die in the new world I founded. I didn't age like them. They tried to declare me their goddess. I refused this. Humanity wouldn't grow like this, and instead I had a temple built in a nearby mountain, where I could keep an eye on them, only guiding them as a priestess, instead to maintain peace and balance with the planet. I sat with a warm drink in the morning, watching over the city when I heard,
Mission. Extermination activated.
I screamed in pain, losing control of my limbs, and opened fire on the people. People who had become my family, friends, followers. They were so dear to my heart. I was greeted with a warm smile, before I aimed my laser at the first victim and fired. The red beam shot out, causing their skull to fall apart and their brain matter to fall to the ground. I chased them down, killing indiscriminately, and when the final survivor of the massacre died, I brought it to my head and fired, then fell to the ground, bleeding out. I didn't die right away. Why? Silence. Why? Just tell me why.
Mission. Extermination. Complete success.
My heartbeat faded out, and I could have sworn I saw him standing in front of me. I hope you enjoy this story. What did you think of it? Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Don't forget to stab the like button, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreon subscribers and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to check out my social media accounts below, including my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.